Today we begin Mission Impossible season on the Collector's Cut, building up to the release of the final Reckoning in May. The original film is almost 30 years old, so let's dive in very slowly without touching the floor, and see how it holds up in 2025. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and your podcast should you choose to accept it. That didn't even make any sense because I'm about to introduce you. Anyway, David's here too.
Relax, it's much worse than it seems.
This is a movie podcast, and we are starting Mission Impossible season. But the idea being that when we get to the final movie in the franchise, we'll be hitting that on its weekend or so of release, and we'll be doing them one a week up until then. So join us for this 8-movie saga, because the 8th one's on its way in about 2 months' time, give or take. What movie was it? There was some movie that was bouncing around the schedule so much that it was giving us such headaches. But whatever it was, I don't trust any release dates anymore. I always think it's going to bump up by a week right at the end and just ruin everything. Well, not much we can do about that now. We had to start this when we started it. We had to time it so it all worked like a well-laid plan, like the IMF doing a heist mission or something. Anyway, Mission Impossible, right? This is a bit more mainstream, perhaps, than some of the other things we've done. It's still relevant, it's still modern, doesn't take much of an explanation, but weirdly, it's been going so damn long that the first one came out in 1996, and it feels of a very different era, and that's something I think we'll be talking about a little bit here. I am curious, had you ever seen this before?
Nope. I think the most exposure I really had to a Mission Impossible was I sat down and watched some YouTube cut, or maybe it was some other thing, but it was all the big stunts, all the set pieces. So I have all those in my mind, but anything surrounding it, how we got here, nothing.
Okay, that's interesting. I have seen them all before, some more than others, but I mean, this one I've seen a few times. It's been a little while, admittedly. I remember seeing it back on cable back in the 90s when I was very, very young. But we'll get into thoughts and feels and all that. I'll just say before we get started, though, that we will start spoiler-free, and we will warn you before we get to the spoilers. And of course, if you are enjoying the show on YouTube, do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch if you do. And you can support the show and get bonus content that we make, bonus shows over on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So, yeah, as far as a premise goes, there's not really much to say other than just Tom Cruise is a secret agent man, and he is on the run, and there is stunts, there is set pieces, there is like heist spy missions, that kind of thing. And the reason why I sort of gloss over plot a little bit, obviously we'll talk about the plot in depth and spoilers, but honestly, the strength of this franchise when it is good isn't really ever the plot. The plot's not really what makes it all click and turn. So, you know, if anything, I'm probably going to be more negative on the plot in a lot of these than I am other elements of it.
Yeah.
So we'll get into everything as we do, but it's actually really weird watching this now and just thinking to myself, Tom Cruise looks so young in this.
He does. There's one bit in this. He's got kind of like a tousled hair look for a lot of this, but there's one point where his hair is just matted down totally flat, and all I can think is it's so 90s. I don't know what to point to it, but him being this young with that hairstyle, it just screams 90s.
It's very 90s. I mean, there's a part of the movie later on set in London, and just from like a personal standpoint, seeing the Sky News logo from the mid-90s and seeing the old BT logo on the phones was really like, whoa, okay, the childhood's like rushing back to me here. This is weird.
That's fair. So, I mean, it wasn't my childhood, but just a major component of this is also involving Usenet groups. And just seeing them try to maneuver that early internet age, I was like, oh my God, you're like babes in the wood. You have no idea what's coming.
There's at one point in this movie where Ving Rhames' character is talking about computer hardware, and he starts saying a bunch of stuff, including at one point something to do with an AI processor. And I thought, look, it's not out of the realm of possibility some computer manufacturer used that phrase in the mid-90s because they wanted it to sound high-tech. That's entirely believable. but it sounds so like watching this in 2025, 30 years later, pretty much, right, almost. It sounds like you're just trying to sound high tech, and you don't. You're nowhere near this.
AI back in the day was just a giant Excel spreadsheet that just took in whatever you wanted to say and returned a phrase. That's it.
I'll put it this way: a major component of this movie is about a floppy disk, and if that doesn't give you an indication of the time period we were in, regardless of whatever high tech stuff they've got in the movie, it's all about a floppy disk, and that's something to keep in mind as we talk about all this. So, Brian De Palma directed the first Mission Impossible, and that's kind of an interesting name. It's a director that I've actually come to really, really like over the last 10 or so years. I'd seen a bunch of his stuff when I was younger, but a lot of his like better stuff, his thrillers from the 70s and 80s, I really discovered about a decade or so ago, or maybe a little bit later for some of them, and I've really grown attached to them. This is kind of in a weird part of his career where he's kind of transitioning from being a surefire hit to being kind of useless in the 2000s. And where does this lie in that transition? Oh, we'll find out when we start talking about quality. So,
well, I mean, box office wise, he's a useful director.
Oh, for this one, sure. I'm sure this made plenty of money. I mean, there's a reason why there's another 7 of them. But interestingly, as a franchise, did not like rush to a sequel, right? You know, the sequel's 2000, which is not too far away. It's only 4 years. But then it was like another 7 years before 3, and then another 4 before the 4th one. So, like, by the time we get to the 4th one, we're already in the 2010s, which is kind of wild, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest thing that, you know, coming at this from 2025, looking back, you remember the Mission Impossible movies coming out every 2 to 3 years. So when you say you're on 8, you backdate that, say 2.5 years per, you're sitting at like mid 2000s. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, wait, never mind. We're all the way back in 96 here. And it just seems so wild that it took that long.
They sped up. They definitely sped up. After the 4th one was a hit, which is Ghost Protocol, once they did 5, which is Fallout, it was like Fallout and then... Rogue Nation and then Fallout. Like, those were quite quick back to back. And then the 7th one would have been quicker if it wasn't for the pandemic. That delayed it a little bit, but they did start to get a little bit more accelerated. I think part of the reason was, one, Tom Cruise wasn't like movie stars being like a thing that'll guarantee a movie's success had kind of died. But Mission Impossible was still a successful franchise, so the industry had kind of shifted towards lots of franchises. So that's one reason. And another reason is Tom Cruise loves doing them and loves being a crazy man with the stunts, and he's realizing, crap, I really shouldn't be doing this at my age as it is. I really can't be doing these for too much longer. So I think he went on a mission to try and squeeze out as many last Mission Impossible movies before his body just gives up. And also the fact that the last one kind of underperformed, but they'd kind of already committed to this last one that's coming out, means it's probably going to be the last one, unless for some reason it does insanely good numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still going to be the last one for Tom Cruise regardless, but it's hard to... it's hard to not underperform, you know, we're in a different era when it comes to the theater experience, and I do think, at least from what I know of Mission Impossible, they seem like a lot bigger of a theater experience than a home experience, so
that's
if it's not doing so well at the theater, then that's kind of an issue there.
I think that really started with the 4th one, just in the sense that, not that, I mean, obviously it was the theory experience before, but the 4th one's the one that was like, okay, we did some of this in IMAX, and IMAX is now a thing, it's been pimped out for a lot of big movies. It was right after, it was about a year and a half after, but, it was soon after Avatar. It was right in that kind of era of, like, everything's been billed as an IMAX experience, and that's kind of stuck with it ever since, and now that's something that all movies sort of vie for, is who's getting the IMAX screens for those few weeks before the next big movie comes and takes them.
The answer is Christopher Nolan. It's always Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, Nolan always gets them, despite the fact that he doesn't always necessarily make movies that fit them. Like Oppenheimer, by all accounts, should not have been an IMAX movie, but Nolan's name was on it, so it was an IMAX movie.
Yep.
So anyway, as we go through the franchise, we'll take note of who dips in and dips out, who maybe comes back, that kind of thing. Obviously, the one constant is Tom Cruise, but and I will obviously refrain from spoiling anything from later movies as well, even once we're in the spoiler section. So Yes. So you got Tom Cruise, you got John Voight, 30 years before his career-defining role in Megalopolis. John Voight is here.
I'm glad you brought it up, because all I was thinking the entire time I'm watching this is him just being like, Ethan, take a look at this boner I got.
Honestly, John Voight, unless he's like really young, maybe, I think I cannot take him seriously, because I just think of well, not even just Megalopolis, even before that, I couldn't, because he's in, I don't know if you've ever seen Anaconda, but he's got like a really stupid accent in that, and that's a little bit after this, so like, and he's in the first Transformers movie, and so I have a hard time taking John Voight seriously, and I'm sure there was a time when that wasn't what people felt, but I struggle. So I forgot he was in this, so when he popped up quite early on, I was like, oh yeah, okay. I'll try and keep a straight face while I'm hearing him do his Voight acting.
I mean, he wasn't bad in this. Like, he wasn't a bad performance, but it definitely is. I don't know. It's just hard knowing what else he's done and seeing him there. It's like when you see Nick Cage in a performance, even if he's doing great in the performance, you're kind of aware he could Nick Cage at any moment here.
I don't know. I feel a little conflict. I don't think it's a great performance from John Voight. I honestly, I'm starting to think that John Voight just maybe was never that great. If I'm perfectly honest, obviously he's not laughable in this like he is in Megalopolis. But I don't think he's that great, and I'll give some more thoughts on that when we're on spoilers. But yeah, and those are the big names. Actually, one that's worth pointing out is Emilio Estevez is in this movie, but he's uncredited.
Yeah, that drove me crazy, because I was looking at the IMDb list and I'm like, where is he? Why can't I find him?
There's a reason for this, actually.
Oh, okay.
He's in this uncredited because Tom Cruise did an uncredited role in one of his movies, and this was him returning a favor.
Okay.
That's it. That's the whole reason.
Did he? I don't know. Like, is there a difference of him being uncredited? Like, is it him not getting paid?
I'm assuming that Tom Cruise, I think it was Young Guns too. I've never seen that. I'm assuming Tom Cruise was a surprise at some point in that movie. So that's why he's uncredited. It's like no one knows Tom Cruise is going to be in it, right? And it's not the only time he's done that. Tropic Thunder comes to mind, where he's kind of in a stealth role in that. Right. But the weird thing with this, though, is that Emilio Estevez's character in this is just kind of there as a normal character at the start of the movie, and it's not like he shows up as a treat halfway through, and you're like, oh, it's Coach Bombay, let's go. Like,
it's not the Chuck Norris in the middle of Expendables 2, where they do a whole sequence of like, oh, check it out, here he is.
That would have been a wild introduction to Estevez in the Mission Impossible movie, though. If he walks out pretending he's the Chuck Norris of the group.
I would love that, though. Like, I would love for, like, just give that entrance to like a Michael Cera role. That would be incredible.
Oh dear. What's so funny about this first movie, and maybe even the second one, but I'm just going to say it right now. I've only seen the second movie once because I remembered hating it when I was younger. Oh, right. Well,
now you've set up expectations in my mind.
So we'll see how that goes. It may not be as bad as I remember. I only saw it once, and it was the year 2000, right? Times were different. Right? Yeah. I was different. So much has evolved. But one of the things that I like about some of the later movies is the idea that there's more of a team dynamic. Even though Tom Cruise is always the star, there's more of a little like ragtag group kind of feeling. And that's something that, like, I mean, it's kind of here in parts in this one, but it's not quite the heart of it either. You know, it always feels like it's Tom Cruise's movie and anyone else is just kind of rotating in and out as they're needed for plot or whatever. So that's something that I do find missing in this. Anyway, I
do want to chime in on that, though, because going off of This Is Mission Impossible, there was the 60s television show.
Yes, that's true. It's based on a TV show, yeah.
From what I understand, having not seen it, that show was a lot more of an ensemble piece.
Yes.
Like the main... there was no real main character. It was all about this group of people performing these missions, kind of closer to like an A-team sort of situation. And that's, based off what you're saying there, that does seem like something that gets better over the series, but this first one here, it is absolutely the Tom Cruise show, 100%.
Yeah. And I think the second one is as well, to be fair. So, interesting thing I noticed in the opening titles actually is that it's one of the writers, at least the story by credit, is Steven Zalian, and I'm like, I know that name. Is that the same guy I'm thinking of? And when I say who am I thinking of, I'm thinking the writer director of both the Night Of from HBO and Ripley on Netflix recently. And it is him. He used to just be a writer. He's only transitioned to directing in sort of later career. But yeah, he's got tons of like writing credits across the board. Also, David Cope was there, who's like sort of like a generic Hollywood guy who, like, he's kind of feasted off the fact that he technically wrote the adaptation script for Jurassic Park, and that's kind of given him cred forever. But he's written a lot of really mediocre generic shit as well.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the Zalian guy though. Schindler's List, Mission Impossible, Gangs of New York. I like that one. And then he's got, Exodus, Gods and Kings.
Yeah, but all over. But sometimes you wonder, is the problem with Exodus, Gods and Kings the script, or is it all the choices that were made, like, in making the movie afterwards?
I wouldn't know because I am choosing to never watch it until I'm forced to.
Well, isn't that a Ridley Scott movie? I feel like one day there'll be a Ridley Scott season where we might have to do that.
Yeah.
So look forward to that, everyone. So yeah, that was just something that stuck out to me. Anyway, there's other cast members to mention and whatnot, but we'll get to that a little bit later. David, what did you think of Mission Impossible?
I think I mostly agree with the little statement you said somewhere in there. The plot is the worst part of it.
A convoluted mess, you might say.
Yeah. I even by the time it got to the end, I kept thinking like, oh, I must have missed something. I must have missed something that someone said, or I must have like misheard something. But by the time it got to the end, I don't think I did. I think the movie just kind of fluttered around just to get pieces where they needed to be. That being said, if I approach this from the viewpoint of a turn off your brain, look at the big stunts, and just have fun with it sort of movie, it's good. It's definitely up there in terms of being a very solid action movie. But I think that there's this long section in the middle. And honestly, the one bit that everybody knows from this movie is like the dangling down on the wires bit. I honestly found that to be like, as it had some tension to it, but in terms of action, it was so slow paced that I just kind of felt like, yeah, okay, we know this is going to end a certain way. And it just didn't quite land for me that well. So overall, I mean, it's mixed opinions and how I view the movie, whether it's through the lens of critical or from a commercial, like just having fun sort of thing. But it's never going to break above a pretty good in either category.
Yeah, I actually disagree with one thing you said there. I think that section in the middle is the best part of the movie. And I'll sort of explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
Is that, and some of the later movies are also like this, where the plot is just kind of whatever, but some of the movies will sometimes multiple times during the movie do this really great job where you can take a section on its own in a vacuum and it just works on its own for like a 25-minute like chunk, where in this movie there's a scene where Ethan Hunt's with a few other characters saying, hey, we need to do this thing, we need to break out of this place and get this floppy disk, right? And then you see them talk about the plan, they set up like what's at stake, how difficult it is, and then you see them actually have to perform the task. And I think in the context of like a self-contained thing, it's really well done because it sets up exactly what the pitfalls are, what the problem, in this case, what the sensors in the room are doing and all that stuff. And then it sees them act it out, and it's tense, it's nail-biting, all that stuff. And on its own, it completely works. Now, admittedly, I do think there's some action stuff at the end that looks surprisingly great still for 1996. Like, I'm very impressed with some of that. But that's a lot more tied into the plot, and the plot's kind of whatever, so it's hard to get as invested.
Yeah. The reasons they're there are stupid and completely irrelevant.
Yes.
But if you just cut it at a certain point and only watch from a point on, you're like, well, I mean, it looks great.
Yeah. So, like, I think that feeling for me is something that even the ones I really like from later are still guilty of, but the plot doesn't weigh them down as much, where it feels like it's taking itself, like, this has got a weird tone to me, where it's like super serious in some ways and wants to be this thriller, but it's also kind of silly and pulpy with some of the over performances for certain characters and things like that. Where I don't know, like part of me appreciates the pulpiness of it and thinks, yeah, it's probably the right call, but at the same time, I also wish it. I guess I think the big thing for me is when I said earlier on that I like the team dynamic that kind of comes into it a little bit more later, is that makes me like the characters more, and that covers a lot of the rough plot for me. Is if I enjoy the characters and I want to root for them as a team, and I feel some camaraderie, and therefore it feels like a little bit of a little bit of a heart to the movie. Whereas in this, like, so much of it is like Ethan doesn't know who he can trust, so he's kind of on his own, and like that. It makes it feel hard for me to invest in the character or characters in this case, I think, and does leave me a little cold. Although I do think the movie is good overall, but it definitely has, some rough edges that I'm not in love with.
I mean, I think for me, when you're talking about the characters, I feel like I've got some characters are defined by their relationship to Ethan, and some characters have just their own little quirk of like what's special about them. But I don't think there's any character that has both. I think that every character is kind of one note in either one or the other. And so when I'm looking at the characters who have their quirk, I like them independently on their own. But when we have like the group dynamic scenes, it feels a bit empty because of that. And then on the flip side, when I'm looking at the group dynamic scenes for the ones that are defined by their relationship to Ethan, I have a hard time like really telling apart. It's like, I think there are 3 different girls on the team here, and 2 of them I could not tell apart to begin with, like, at all. And maybe that's face blindness for me, but like it is like they didn't do a good enough job of setting up the quirks of these characters, the ones that have a more personal relationship to Ethan. So by the time that we're getting deeper into the plot, I don't know who they are. I don't know like what specifically is special about these ones, except that Ethan knows them.
It's funny because as they were like doing their first big mission early on, I was like, you explained it very quickly, but if you ask me to explain why they're here right now, like what the real purpose of this is, I'd have a hard time. And it kind of like, because they kept coming back to the same idea throughout all the missions, I'm like, okay, I kind of understand it in hindsight, but they kind of rushed through some of the explanation a little bit, and I kind of get it, but sometimes simplicity is more important, I think. To like, if you're going to be like just a fun action movie, then keep things relatively simple. But this movie's obsessed with the double crosses and the triple crosses and the who can trust who and all the rest of it. And I'm not saying that I can't enjoy that if it's really well done, but that's the sort of stuff where I'm like, well, that needs to be really well done for me to like it. So I don't know. I think it is good overall. I just think that it's, I think there's some rough edges. I think that I know because I've seen the later movies where I do like some of them more. Like, I understand to some extent what's missing, or at least from what Mission Impossible becomes. Now, arguably, and that's the interesting thing about watching this and like seeing how 90s it is like, yeah, like when Brian De Palma made this movie, he wasn't thinking about what the franchise would be 6 movies later. He was just trying to make a movie on its own. And there's so many things about this that they would never do now.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's a couple of weird, like, I won't say intense, but there's a couple of weird, like, sexual undertone moments that feel like, oh, that's Brian De Palma letting his sleazy side out a little bit. Like, just a little bit. It's nothing compared to his previous movies where he was doing, like, erotic thrillers, but, I can definitely see that in there. And then even just the fact that the opening title card is, like, based on the old TV show logo, and it's the big sort of stamp, like, Impossible, like, on it, and I'm like, yeah, they would never use that logo now. They wouldn't even dare using that in the opening titles.
They got to get something that's been market tested, sleek, turn of the millennium, nice looking back for this film. Like,
okay,
having it be a stamp is like, oof.
Now I've said that, I bet they do it for the last one for nostalgia.
Oh, well, yeah, nostalgia.
the nostalgia pop, they may do it for the nostalgia pop in the final one.
The order of events here in terms of marketability is like the actual marketability itself of what focus group says, and then nostalgia. Like, that trumps always.
Yes. Okay. All right. I've talked myself into it.
I bet in the final film they're going to do that same, like, there was a very brief shot of a fuse lighting in this one. which I know is from the original series. I bet they'll do that as well in the final.
Oh, I mean, I've done that again. That's definitely in the opening titles of the fourth one.
Oh, is it? All right, fair enough.
Definitely. Because I remember watching... Because I saw that a couple of times in theater, because I really like that one. So,
all right. Fair enough.
Yeah, Ghost Protocol is my favorite, so everyone brace yourselves for the positivity in that.
I'll come in with full negativity, just like, I don't know.
I don't know. You're going to see him dangling off that building. You're going to be like, you know what? I can't help but love this.
I just think Brad Bird's a little overrated. What has he done for me lately?
I will smack that whore mouth off of you, David.
I know.
Don't you dare besmirch Bird, all right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't really have much more to say. I think that the action in this is good, but every other aspect of it is kind of okay or less. And it's just, nothing's really popping out of me as like, what I understand why this was a success, because it is a solid action flick, but like, it's nothing that's going to really make a mark in terms of like, what was the first Mission Impossible movie about? I don't know, spies. Like, that's about the most I get out of it.
I'm not that invested in the plot, but certainly, and that's what we've kind of been saying, but it is a good action movie with the good action scenes, and I do think it's, not everyone, but I think there's a lot of good actors in here who are, Tom Cruise is obviously a movie star. He has the charm to be that. If anything, one of the faults of the movie, though, is just kind of like, hey, you'll like him because he's Tom Cruise. We're not going to really give you much to like care about him early on.
Yeah.
Like you just kind of have to accept that you like him because he's Tom Cruise and just roll with it, pretty much.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. There's exactly one thing about Ethan's personal life that I learned in this movie, and frankly, he doesn't seem to give a damn about it. So.
Oh dear. All right. All right, spoilers then. And I feel like, for most people, this is a pretty well-known, well-seen movie, so I imagine most of you are prepared for spoilers. And we somehow still talked for 25 minutes before we got there. That's impressive.
I mean, we went off on a while for other stuff. Christopher Nolan, IMAX, all that.
That was like 30 seconds. We have kept this mostly on topic. But yeah, spoilers for Mission Impossible. You have been warned. Okay, so here's number one, right? So it'd been a while since I watched this, so I didn't remember it super well, like because the plot is, like we say, kind of convoluted and nonsensical. But as soon as John Voight appeared on screen, I went, I don't know if it's my memory triggering or if I just don't trust you as a good guy, but you're the villain.
All right, that's interesting, because I actually read a trivia bit on this that he was cast in this role specifically because the people didn't think he would be thought of as a villain.
Hey, times have changed. I didn't see a lot of John Voight in 1986 when I was 7 years old.
Why not, man? I thought you were a critic.
Hey, this is maybe his career post Mission Impossible that have sullied my opinion of him, but I just, like, he's just got a shifty look in his face the entire time. Like, he just always has a glare that's like, you're up to something.
Yeah.
You're up to something.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess you could play it off as the fact of they are all spies. Like, by definition, they're up to something. It's all intrigue and double cross, but yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say if it's because I have memories of seeing it, so I kind of roughly have an idea of where it's going. But so a big part of this movie, obviously, he turns out to be the villain, and the attractive woman who's effectively the female lead of the movie, right? Claire, played by Emmanuelle Béart. Is that how you pronounce that? Béart?
I don't know what that little tilde means.
Yeah,
over the E.
I don't know what the accent's doing to the pronunciation, because I mean, obviously it'd just be Béart if you were ignoring that, but,
right?
But there's an accent, so I have to acknowledge it.
I think that's the same one in Pokemon, so it'd be an E, like a hard E. So Béart,
Okay.
Something like that.
Some French.
It's French, so it's French, so no solid T at the end. It's just Béart.
Béart. Sounds like a pirate. Béart, me matey.
Béart.
Anyway, so she, like, early on, they just casually mentioned that that's John Voight's wife in that, and I'm like, wait, really? This younger, much attractive woman is John Voight's? Okay, fine, whatever. But then she is around, and it's like, I genuinely had the thought halfway through this movie, like, okay, clearly there's reason to suspect that she could also be a bad guy, right? Because she's married to the guy who is definitely the bad guy. But And it's even a question for Ethan later on in the movie. He's like, oh, I don't know if she's in on it. Is she a bad guy too or not? Right? That's the whole question. But I legitimately halfway through the movie went, I genuinely cannot remember if this woman turns out to be a villain or not.
Well, I mean, in the context of the movie, mostly, but they leave it up to debate as to like how villainous she was.
I think she's a villain. She knew what was going on, and she had like a little moment of redemption at death. I think that's kind of how I read that.
Well, the movie hints, did she or did she not directly kill one of the characters? And they never actually answer that. So that's her only little moment of redemption there.
Well, I don't give a shit.
Yeah. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. She's a bad guy. Like if you're listing off protagonist and antagonist, she's in the antagonist column. But it's the question of, I think the movie wanted you to question her liberties as well, because she is, as you said, kind of the femme fatale here. She's kind of that like temptation to Ethan this whole way through.
Yeah, although it's played more like she's the soft, gentle, I'm scared of everything that's happened to us kind of character. You know, like they don't play it like, oh, can we trust her because she's been all sly or what? You know, like it doesn't come across that way. Which, you know, fine, right? Maybe that's too much of a caricature, but I don't know. It would have been more interesting perhaps than like what we actually get here. Aside from the middle of the movie where it's like a team actually doing a mission, because then it actually feels like, oh, everyone's got a role to play, and it's like, oh, they're being useful in their roles. I actually, what's so neat about talking about this is that they very do neatly break this movie up into sections to discuss, because you've got a little prologue scene, which is basically just, hey, here's the team doing a random mission quickly, and sets up the fancy masks that they can make.
If you want to tell me, like, that's the thing. Everyone else has their quirk. Emilio Estevez is definitely the tech guy. John Voight's the man behind the chair. Like, everyone's got their thing. I have to imagine Ethan Hunt is the mask guy. He's the one who's putting on all the fancy disguises. And I don't feel like that carries over to later movies, but he's definitely that here.
It may or may not pop up at some point in a later movie.
Fair enough.
Well, yeah, well, what's interesting about this, right? I mean, the opening scene's whatever, and the only thing I even want to say about it is that it's just like them tricking some guy into admitting where a contact is. And like, you know, Tom Cruise is wearing a mask, and it turns out that this guy's scared because he thinks he's killed a woman, but it turns out that it's actually Claire who's pretending to be dead, and Tom Cruise wakes her up, and there's a little moment as she's waking up where her cheek kind of caresses his hand, and I'm like, oh, sexual tension. So that's setting up that there's potential, because I almost thought it was setting up a motive for John Voight, that he suspected an affair with Tom Cruise, and that's partly why he went evil. That's not actually a part of it, though. It's just... It turns out, though, she was meant to try and seduce him so that Tom Cruise would care about her, so that he would fall for everything that was planned.
Yeah. Apparently, somewhere in the script, there was going to be... Or somewhere in the early phases, the script was going to have a much more heavily developed love triangle. But it's kind of just left on this. Yeah, she's just a little bit tempting the whole way through.
I think I'm glad that they didn't do that, because that sounds tedious.
Yeah. It just sounds like it's not the tone this movie's going for. It's as much as it's kind of a James Bond-esque thing, the womanizing aspect is just not what we're doing here.
Yeah, so what's so funny is you were saying how there's two other women on the team, and you couldn't tell them apart. Well, I could, because I assumed you were meaning Claire and the other woman, who, not the one who's with Tom Cruise with the British accent, the one who was just sort of on the stairwell with the glasses for most of her scenes. I did know them apart, but that's just because I remembered that Claire was going to be around for the rest of the movie, and the others were dead. So,
really, yeah.
In my head, it was very distinct. And that's the thing, is that because the rest of the team all get killed off in this big mission that they go do, which does take up more of the runtime than I think I remembered it taking up. It's a good chunk of time.
It's like half an hour minimum.
Yeah. So they get this mission. They're in Prague, and John Voight's gotten the tape saying your mission should you choose to accept it, which does suggest he could just say no and be like, nah, I don't think I will. I'll just go home.
He's like, no, this is way too dangerous. Why would I do that? I got a pension.
He's got ulterior motives, of course, because he's doing bad things. He's a villain, you see. But we get like a little bit of the team interacting before they go on the mission, but it's not a lot. It's basically making fun of Claire's coffee making skills and throwing some jabs around. There's not really much to it.
Yeah, it's the weakest form of interpersonal. Like they're just kind of forwarding the plot and giving exposition while masquerading it as character dynamics, where it's like, oh yeah, your coffee's so weak. By the way, where were you last week? I was at this hotel in Chicago. And it's like, I see that you're trying to make it like these characters are just catching up, but this is absolutely just exposition for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. I think this opening chunk, I think, does suffer a little bit from us having a better understanding of what their mission is. Like, they set up, okay, this guy's here, he's stolen half of this fancy list, which is the knock list, which is like basically all the secret agents in the CIA, like all their identities, that kind of thing.
I did look this up. Apparently, there's spies that if they're caught, the country will basically say, yeah, that was a spy. Okay, do you want to do a trade for one of your spies that we caught? But the knock list is the spies that the country will be like, nope, that's not one of ours. You can kill them. Like, they're definitely not with us. So if this list were to get public of their identities, it would just lead to a bunch of murders all at once.
Yeah, I mean, and that's set up well enough. Like, I get the stakes at play. But it's more the actual mission itself and what they're actually... Because it basically all boils down to... I mean, maybe it's not that it's poorly explained. Maybe it's more just that it's not that interesting, because it's like, oh, we're going to, like, watch the guy steal the list on the disc, and then we're going to follow him. And it's like, oh, okay. But so we've got all this like stuff with wearing masks and like keeping track of him with fancy glasses and all this tech that you've set up. And Emilio Estevez is in the elevator shaft, like hacking into things. And it's all just to watch the guy. Like, there's not like here's a goal. This is why it's difficult. This is what we have to achieve. Here we have to go do it, right? Obviously, it's not really until, oh, someone's betrayed them and killed Emilio Estevez in the elevator, which was almost a horror movie death, honestly. The way... Oh,
absolutely. That was straight up Saw. Absolutely.
Because he's sitting on top of the elevator and like someone, turns out to be John Voight, who, to be fair, they did already establish that he could like hack in and like also gain control of stuff, because he opens a door or something for them like, a few minutes earlier. So the breadcrumb is there to piece it together, but he moves the elevator up all the way so that Emilio Estevez gets impaled in the eyes by like these spiky parts that are at the roof of the elevator shaft, which I'm not so sure if those are actual things you would find in an elevator shaft, but they look pretty menacing.
I feel like you could make the argument that, sure, whatever is up there, but the fact that they literally like unfurl, they put out the spiky bit just to impale Emilio, I'm like, all right, that seems more focused and Saw-like than a normal elevator shaft would be.
Was that also computer controlled? Did John Voight do
this
that
is
as
1996.
Well?
Everything's computer controlled, baby.
At one point, you see Tom Cruise using the computer and going out the internet, and he literally types in internet access into like a box, and I went, I don't think it ever worked like that. Not on Windows, anyway.
Nah. It's God. This is the same guy who wants an artificial chip, or an artificial intelligence chip, I should say.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, the whole thing really goes off though once they're outside and like clearly something's went wrong. Estevez has been killed. They're like, hey, and John Voight says, oh, like I'm going to come to you, and then he says he's been followed, but it's like we the audience don't see any evidence of that. He's just sort of looking over his shoulder, all shifty. So everything kind of goes down, and so it's kind of this confusing little moment where a bunch of them get killed, where the other woman gets into a car. I mean, that's after John Voight apparently dies. But even, like, John Voight's death, because he's wearing these glasses, they've got a camera in them, so Ethan Hunt can actually see it on his little fancy watch, the video feed, which I'm like, damn, the Wi-Fi on these, or not even the Wi-Fi, this would be like negative 1G? Like, what are we rocking in 1896 here?
This is literally just landline access held up. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah, but he sees like this POV shot of like looking down at a gunshot and like seeing blood in the hands. And then John Voight like tumbles into the water, which I think he was somewhat. I guess it's because it's still on the camera. But part of me was thinking, like, do you have to actually go into the water? Like,
yeah.
It feels kind of excessive. I guess it's so he won't look for the body, I guess, because it's in the water.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, as a spy, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to be like, hi, yeah, I saw a dead body go down over there. Could you please pull him out ASAP and don't look into his identity once you find him? Thank you.
So there's a whole thing where Ethan Hunt's chasing around for him, but then like someone comes out of the shadows and kills the guy that stole the disc in the first place, but also kills the other woman that was on the team. And then the other woman with the glasses goes into a car, and that car blows up. And Ethan Hunt sees that once he's went on the run. So like all the team die very quickly, very targeted. Yeah.
So I just want to bring up one bit of trivia for this because it is, I think, would have been slightly more interesting. It would have resulted in the exact same movie, mind you. But originally, what this was supposed to be was this was going to be the original cast of the TV show Mission Impossible. And this was essentially going to be the passing of the torch moment where it's like the old team is dead. The new guy, Ethan, is the only one who's left, and therefore he has to continue on. And in fact, Jon Voight's character, obviously it wasn't Jon Voight playing him back then, but Jon Voight's character is the same name as one of the main characters from the TV show. So there is some continuity there. But apparently once the cast found out about it, and when they were asked to come back in those roles, they were all like, you want to kill us in the first act and then just go off and do, instead of an ensemble bit, an action bit with one guy? I don't think you quite understand what the TV show was about, bro. And so every single one of them just completely bailed on it.
Well, they must have all been pretty old by the time this was made, because the show was from like the 60s, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it would, well, yeah,
70s
60s
maybe?
into 70s. It ran for like 6-7 seasons, so it was around for a while there. But I mean, just add 20 years onto that, they would have been probably 50s, 60s.
Okay. Also, I've got a funny feeling Jon Voight's character wasn't a secret villain in the show, would be my guess.
No, that's the other part of people who really like the original show were like, you just ruined this character. You made him a horrible guy for no reason.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's an interesting tidbit. I don't know if it would have improved anything necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, functionally, it would. If I told you that all of these characters were just carryovers from the previous series, you wouldn't have known the difference. So,
yeah, I think this whole section for me is okay, but I don't love it. And I think part of, like I said, I think that the actual mission they're doing is not that interesting. And I think once stuff starts going bad, right, and like it does feel oddly disjointed, and it's kind of intentional because something isn't adding up. That's the point, is that like someone's doing this and we don't know who or where. But I actually find like when stuff's going wrong and Jon Voight says he's been followed, like I do feel like I'm not enjoying this part. Like something just feels kind of disjointed about the whole thing, and I don't know. Like I wasn't like, instead of making me go, oh, there's like something mysterious happening here, I'm intrigued, like what's going on, I'm just kind of sitting going, oh, this isn't like flowing very well. Like something's off, is how I feel.
I think I enjoyed this first part a little bit more just because I felt like it had promise. Like I wasn't actively enjoying what they were doing at that moment, but this idea of they were doing a routine mission, everything started going wrong, and they are basically just cast to the wind, and they all have to find out what to do. And then, some of them die, some of them don't. But I like the promise of all that. Where I think it falls apart is the very next sequence where Ethan is accused of basically being the one responsible. And that's where I'm like, it's lost all promise, and it just becomes I have to clear my name sort of thing.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Ethan like runs to a phone, he puts in a little thing and like calls a secure number and says blah 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 blah, the team's dead. And he meets someone from the CIA named Kittredge.
By the way, this isn't this might be CIA, this guy he talks to, but the group that they're a part of is the IMF.
Oh yeah, I called him that earlier, but this guy's from the CIA, I'm pretty sure.
Is he? Okay.
Or he's maybe he's in charge of IMF, but he operates from CIA. I don't know. Yeah, nothing really matters. So Kittredge says, come and meet me at this restaurant, and he goes to speak to him at the restaurant, right? Notably, there's a big fish tank in the background because that comes into play at the end.
Yeah.
Right? I hate this scene. Like, this to me, this is the scene where I'm like, everything that's wrong with this movie's in this scene. I don't like the fact that, like, it takes this turn where Ethan's like, wait a minute, all these people working here were people that I saw earlier on. They're also agents. You had a second IMF team following us. and like tracking everything. Why would you do that? And it's like, oh, because there's a mole and they're working with someone named Max to get this knock list, blah, 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 blah. And the entire time, I hated the extreme Dutch angles. I think Kittredge was overacting. The actor, Henry Czerny, did not like his performance here. It felt like it was just going super like pulpy, sinister in a way that did not vibe with me. And the big problem for me at this point, though, is that I'm realizing as they're doing this scene where the entire thing is, you're alive, so we're blaming you. We're thinking you're the mole, and now you have to go on the run from the people you're supposed to be working for, is that you've not made me really care about him yet. So I don't really give a shit that he is like being put into this position because I don't like him yet.
Yeah, I found myself thinking that. I'm like, oh, they're doing the bit where he has to clear his name. I thought for sure this would be like movie 3 or movie 4. Like, I thought this was something where I was going to get to know this guy, his normal stuff, and then we get around to that eventually.
Like, it's not every movie, but him and his team have had to go rogue at least another 2 times, if not 3 times.
Apparently enough to fill a whole nation's worth.
Like, seriously, the amount of times they're not just working and doing a mission because it's what they're supposed to be doing, and it's because they have to clear their name or they have to go like against the government or something. Like, it's happened several times at this point by the time we get to the last movie.
Yeah. But no, I agree with you though, because I think the sequence also is just impossible to do, but they did it especially poorly because not only is it setting up this character as, oh, we have to care about him despite the fact that we have absolutely no stakes in him yet. But also, this is a massive exposition dump of everything that is critical to understanding the rest of the movie. We understand this character named Max is going to be purchasing this stuff. That would be the reason why he would get out. That apparently, for some reason that I don't think was ever actually explained, Ethan's parents' farm, which was currently in bankruptcy, was all of a sudden paid off and they had like tons of cash now. And it's just a massive dump, and it just doesn't get any better throughout.
Explains probably generous, but there is an implication when Ethan goes to see Max and says, hey, job.
Oh, yeah.
Job asked for 120 grand. That 120 grand was to put into his parents' bank account to make it look like he was getting paid off for...
Because he got framed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, fair enough, but like that just goes to show you that it's not clear, and it's all very muddled here, and you're lost in all of these horrible Dutch angles. The acting is also not great.
Yeah.
It's just, and then the scene doesn't end with even like an action sequence. It ends with an action moment, and then we just have to roll into the next thing where he's already to work discovering like, how do I stop this? How do I fix?
Yeah, I don't mind it having an action scene because like that's if that's not what it is, that's not what it is. But I just don't like the contents of the scene. Like you say, it's very exposition heavy. But the big problem for me is just that I do not care about him enough yet to give a shit that he has been put into this position. And the way that Kittredge, the handler dude or whatever his role is. The way he sort of turns kind of villainous as he starts getting accusatory, and I don't know, just the tone of it all just feels off to me, and it's kind of a shame because it kind of sets off the main plot in a little bit of a sour note, and even the stuff that follows right after, where Tom Cruise goes back to the hideout, which by the way, the rest of IMF don't know where they were operating out of. This was the safe place to go.
I mean, they said it's a safe house. I guess maybe every crew is allowed to like pick their own safe house that's not known by anyone else.
I assume so. But it was just it did pop into my head as I'm like, wait, you went back to the place where you were working with your team. I feel like the uppers might know where that is. But
even if the uppers didn't, if you were just told that there's a mole, and it seems like he does believe that there is a mole, that Kittredge wasn't just lying to him, like, why would you trust a place that your entire team knows as well? Like, clearly you should be going somewhere else.
And that's actually the other thing is that so he believes there's a mole. So then I said, okay, but Ethan, which one is the mole? Because you know it's not you.
Mm-hmm.
And you think everyone else is dead at this point. So who do you think it is exactly?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, they said there's a mole in IMF. They didn't say it was technically his team. This was just to like basically test out his team, ferret it out. But now that his team is all dead, theoretically it would be somebody who is at least somewhat connected with his team, because they would be the only ones who would know about the job, theoretically.
I think that's the other thing that bugs me here, is that it's like, oh, this entire operation was actually just a mole hunt. The disc that was stolen was a fake, and even the person who stole it was actually someone working for IMF, so he was also an innocent person that got killed. But like, obviously they weren't just killing everyone. Like, the IMF weren't killing his team here. That's clearly the bad person, whoever that is. That's the mole that's doing that. But it does feel kind of weird to me that there's never a point where that's made exceptionally clear to the audience that, okay, you did this whole sting operation just to test out everyone on the team, but the fact that everyone on the team, barring one and later two people, are dead, like, can we talk about how that's kind of a big deal, and like maybe really emphasize that that's what they think Tom Cruise has done here? They think Ethan has murdered the rest of his team. It feels like they kind of dance around it and never quite just explicitly state it, and that also bothers me.
I think my theory with this is that they couldn't really give any definitive reasons here with the way they set it up, because they wanted to do that little half, like almost a twist towards the end where you're thinking it might be Kitteridge who is the mole himself, and they touch on that for just a moment, and then they come back over and say, no, actually, John Voight.
In hindsight, I think that's why they're doing the extreme Dutch angle on him, and he's kind of aggressive here, is because it's like, oh, this is going to feel believable later when it's suggested that he might be the bad guy. But I don't know.
But again, that limits if you're having to say, okay, the person is giving you all this information, you have to be able to trust the information. So what he's saying needs to be provably true. But he's also the mole, so why would he give that information to begin with? And so you've got this weird little tango where they can't do too much with it, but they also have to give enough for the rest of the plot to be able to unfold. Yeah,
I think the information is like the information that they get for what then turns out to be flipped on its head, especially when you're dealing with a movie where there's going to be twists and turns and there's going to be double crosses and reveals. You have to have some sort of solid footing, some grounding that makes it feel like you started with something solid you could depend on. And everything we get in this movie early on for what drives the entire plot is very kind of vague and wishy-washy, or it comes from sources that we later question. And it's because this Kittredge guy, we've never seen in another scene before this one, which is actually something else that bothers me, is that I have no idea if I should be taking him in this scene where he's talking to Ethan as a position of authority. Yeah, obviously Ethan knows who he is and he comes down and sits with him, but it would have meant a lot to see him back at home base, like issuing an order or something, or just something, or being on the phone with Voight or whatever. I don't know, anything.
There's the opening sequence where John Voight is playing a cassette that gives him the mission.
Yes.
All you would need is, instead of it being a voiceover, have it be this guy's head on the tape. So we know that he is higher up than John Voight.
Yes.
He is someone in a position of authority, and then you just continue on there.
Yeah, I think that would have went a long way to giving him some credibility. Whereas as soon as Tom Cruise sat down, I'm like, wait, do we even know for sure if this is a guy you might be talking to? Is he pretending to be IMF? I mean,
well, that's what I think the phone call right beforehand, I think it's supposed to intentionally make you doubt him, because he ends the call with saying, I'll be there myself. And Tom Cruise says, wait a minute, why are you in Prague? And he never gets an answer. So you're left with this uncertainty hanging of like something bigger is going on.
And there is a justification for it in hindsight, which is that, oh, he's there because this entire mission's actually a mole hunt where they're testing out their team. So he's here personally to try and oversee that, which is a fine enough logical explanation. But the way it plays out in the movie is a little, I don't know, like I guess it feels like you're being misled in a way that I don't find very satisfying.
Yeah. You're purposely being misled before you're given that solid footing. That's the issue here. Is that way they're immediately trying to do a twist. They're trying to pull something on us before we have any idea what the normal path would even be. So it's just confusing at best.
Yeah. But of course, there is a real bad guy trying to get this disc, right? This Max character did try and pay off codename Job, right?
Well, it is codename Job, as we find out eventually, but apparently the task itself of getting this disc was labeled as Job 3:14, which they immediately turn into a Bible code the moment Ethan sits down.
Yeah. He sits down at a computer and he sees a Bible sitting there, so he goes and messages some whatever. I don't know. He basically ends up contacting Max. But yes, Job.
He contacts Max by essentially just going into every chat room on the internet that has anything to do with the Bible and just typing in max@bible.com. Don't use that disc.
Yeah, the scene. Honestly, the scene wasn't that exciting. But yeah. Anyway, I was trying to make a joke from Arrested Development joke for like 30 seconds, and you kept jumping in, you prick. So the time has passed. We're just going to move on now. So instead of having the nice little laugh.
I'm sorry. I've made a horrible mistake.
All right. So
I think this might be the last episode, guys. I might not make it through.
Someone's getting John Voighted.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold up a blanket and say, "Look at my boner."
So anyway, Claire shows up, right? I mean, Ethan's having a little dream where he imagines John Voight shows up. This is the thing, is in the scene with Kittredge, when Kittredge just gives him all the exposition and he's pretending that they're friendly until Tom Cruise notices everyone's actually a secret agent and then says, wait a minute, you set all this up, blah, blah, blah. He's acting like a friend at first. And he's like, hey, I'm so sorry, Ethan. I knew how close you were to everyone, especially Jim. And they try and kind of like, oh, they're trying to tell me that him and John Voight were especially close. Like they're kind of maybe
like a father-son sort of thing.
A protege type thing, whatever. So they give us this little nightmare sequence or dream sequence of John Voight stumbling in and saying something, and then Ethan Hunt wakes up and like Claire's standing
like,
there.
oh, you should have been there. I needed you and you weren't there for me.
Yeah, the usual stuff, right? So Claire's there and Ethan's paranoid. He checks for a recording device. He's quite rough, but ultimately, there's nothing. And he's like, "Wait, why are you here now? Why have you not shown up till 4 a.m.?" And she's like, "Because we were told to abort, and the mission was always if we abort, then we don't come back to base until 4 a.m. for safety reasons." And I'm like, okay, that's a good enough reason, I suppose. But
I especially appreciate how they do the little punctuation mark of whatever like bell tower off in the distance dinging 4 a.m. right at that moment.
And it's like, okay, all right. And she acts kind of distraught, and she's like, oh no, Jim is dead. This is her finding out my husband is dead. Oh, all right, okay.
This is her finding out.
Yes, quote unquote.
Wink.
So yeah, this section of the movie is basically him getting in touch with Max. He gets a response back from one of the Maxes that he messaged, giving instructions on how to like speak to Max, which involves going to like a park bench, asking for a match. He gets taken into a car, put a sack over his head or like a wool mask or whatever it is.
Yeah, balaclava.
And he's taken to a place and he's told to keep the mask on, but he's like, look, let's just take the mask off. And it's like, hey, well, if Max doesn't like you, we're going to have to kill you because you've seen their face. And he's like, I'll take the chance. So they take the mask off, and turns out Max is a woman, right? That's your little twist here.
I love seeing you dodge around pronouns for that long.
It's easy. You just say they.
I know, but like you were also using the name Max every so often instead of just saying he or she.
Yeah. Well, her name is Max. She just go by Max, though. It's not a trick.
Is it? I thought that was a hint in there of like, oh, who are you really? And they said Max is the anonymous name. It's just the alias.
Yeah, I said she goes by Max. That still counts as going by Max.
Okay, fair. Sorry, the way you phrased that, it just sounded like that's her actual name.
Okay, I'm not saying it's our legal name, but like she never uses anything else in the movie. We never find out another name.
Hey, I just want to know what's on the birth certificate. Is that so much to ask?
What pretend to fight me on?
I'm not fighting, sorry. I just misunderstood. You are right, Peter. You are always right. I am but a lowly serf amongst your greatness. Moving on.
Accepted. Don't let it happen again. All right. Anyway, what was I saying? So Max is saying, yes, I bought the disc, and Ethan's like, no, don't check it. It'll have a tracker on it, blah, blah, blah. You can't hook up. And it's like, okay. And part of me was thinking, well, maybe just disconnect the internet from the computer you plug it into. That might fix that. But
well, it seems like it has a beacon inside the disc itself. So like the moment that it's connected to electricity or something, it would work.
Fair enough. I'll accept that. But like, you know, this is me using modern technology knowledge to like plot hole weird little things in this. So she's not really convinced, but he's like, look, if you're going to check the disc if you want, but like they're going to show up within minutes if you do that. And sure enough, they put it in, and a van shows up, and it's men all in white coats pretending to not be CIA or IMF agents. They're just kind of, but they're tracking the signal.
I love they come in dressed as like chefs, but then immediately they've got guns drawn, and I'm like, bro, you didn't even try to have a cover there.
So yeah, they come out of the room, but by this point, of course, Max and Ethan have fled, and now Max, because this all turned out to be true, is now buddy with Ethan. He's like, oh, you young man, you saved my bacon there. We can do a deal. What do you want? And he's like, well, the real knock list is actually in Langley, and I can get it for you. Like, I'll do it. All I want in return, other than the hefty amount of money that you're going to give me, is I want whoever Job is to be at the handover. I want to see who Job is. That's the payment. So
by the end of this sequence, I get it. I understand in general what the plan is, but I found the bit between him sending off messages to Max up to that moment so confusing, because from my perspective of not knowing what was happening, it seemed like Ethan's plan was, we can't let this list get out into the open. Therefore, I'm going to make sure this person who is trying to buy the list does not get caught. Like, it was like, obviously it's a little bit of a double cross there in that we have further down machinations, but like it was just so confusing to me as to why he was warning Max not to use the disc for so long.
Yeah, I think my bigger thing here is that, okay, I understand why he's doing this. I understand that he's making this deal, and he's going to go steal, and we're going to get this whole big heist section of the movie, which is, I do think is the best part of the movie. Because, hey, we've got a simple goal. We have to steal thing. Here's all the things we can do to do that, and it'll be fun, it'll be well shot, all the rest of it. But the thing that was in my mind that was a bother for like character motivation, I was like, hey, earlier on in the movie when they were doing the mission and they thought they were trying to like protect the real list, the real information, right? When they thought this guy had stolen it. It's like when he was told to abort the mission, Ethan was like, no, we can't do that, sir. Like, this list, like, people will die. We have to go. Like, he really cared about not letting the information get out there. And I was thinking, wait, he's willing to do this now for this, like, I mean, Max is still a bad guy. Like, she's still going to use it for nefarious purposes and sell it off to, you know, whatever governments want to know who all the spies are. Like, she's going to do lots of bad things. Now, to be fair, this is eventually addressed later, much later in the movie. When he kind of like reveals to Ving Rhames, hey, I don't actually want this to get out there, and I know you don't want it either, so your job, like in the final act of the movie, is to make sure that this list does not actually get, like, you know, beamed anywhere, no one receives it, it never leaves the local place we're at. So they do eventually address it and show that Ethan is still, you know, thinking about that, he still cares about protecting the names on that list. But for a long portion of this movie, you kind of just assume that he's kind of given up his morals, and he's just like, now I just want revenge, so I'm just going to do this bad thing that I was trying to stop earlier on. So I don't know. It would have been, I don't know. I don't know how you fix it necessarily, but it was something that bothered me in the moment.
Again, I think it's just kind of the issue of how convoluted the plan is, because we open up this movie with the idea that the list was split in two. One of them is a list of all the code names, but the other one is a list of how the code names match up to the actual identities. They have the first half, so therefore, any disc that they get, any list, has to have all of those names actually on there in order to prove that, like, oh, this is actually the list. So they can't just make up a fake disc, because they'd easily be able to compare and say, well, that's not the same list of code names, therefore it's not true. But at the same time, bringing in the actual list just seems so ridiculously risky that any sort of actual like CIA operation should be like, okay, we're going to take that fake list that we knew about before, populate it with fake names, and then try to ferret them out. Like, we're not going to bring the actual honest to God thing into this at all.
That is fair. Yeah, it's convoluted. There's no denying that. However, now we have a simple mission, right? We have a simple goal, which is to steal this thing in the headquarters of the CIA, which heavily protected, you might imagine, full of CIA agents also. So, like, and I think they do a good job of like this in its own little section of like, okay, we need some team members. We're not even going to talk about how we found them. It's just we looked for people who were also like on the naughty list from the CIA or whatever.
Yes, it's disavowed,
Yes.
I believe is the actual terminology.
So we cut to on a train, and it's like Ethan and Claire, and they're with two new characters. One's Luther, played by Ving Rhames, and the other is Krieger, played by Jean Reno.
Yes.
Who, of course, is another kind of notable actor from the time period as well. And it's like, hey, we're going to steal this thing. We're going to do this. This is the scene where Luther talks about all the tech that he wants to use to hack into the CIA's building.
Yeah.
But it's off the grid, right? It's not connected to the internet, so you have to actually be there in person. And Ethan's like, yeah, we're going to do it. We're pulling this off, damn it. So, Mission Impossible theme kicks in, we go. But I think they do a good job, though, when he's explaining the plan, or not even the plan, but he's explaining the defenses of the room. And he's like, okay, it can't alter temperature too much, because if it can sense that there's another person in there, it'll set off the alarms. The floor's pressurized, so if anything touches the floor, and except for when someone's meant to be in there. So when the door's shut and the person who goes in there is not there, the floor's pressurized, it will trigger the alarms. And then sound is the other one, where if it over a certain decibel, it will just trigger the alarms. So sets up all these things, and we get an example of how easy it is, like the drop of the coffee or whatever it is hits the floor. But I think what's good about this is showing the room in advance, showing the guy who uses it and like what his routine is going in and out of the room. I think just like clearly establishes all the little pitfalls, and it means that later on, when we've got the ticking time bomb, which is him coming back to the room and they're trying to get out in time, we understand exactly like what 5 in the clock is, what 4 in the clock is, what 3 in the clock is, because we understand the process of him getting into the room. And I think that's all very neatly done. It's very well executed. And the actual plan itself is kind of funny to watch, because you've got a lot of other things that play, like Jean Reno try to hold him up with the zip line, that's because obviously at one point it breaks and Tom Cruise almost hits the floor, and that's when he's doing his whole like, I can't touch it, the whole bit.
I agree with you on pretty much every point there. I think it's kind of just using the language of heist movies at that point, where a lot of heist movies, they'll establish the plan, here's how we're doing it, and they show visually, we move from A to B to C to D, and that way the audience understands here's what's happening, and therefore, if something goes wrong, we know exactly where it's going wrong. My only critique with this sequence is that there are 3 defenses, as you said. There's the pressure plates, there's the sound, and there's the temperature. I think the pressure plates are obviously 100% very well used in terms of they can't touch the floor's lava, and they make that the focal point of this entire heist. I think the sound is there as well to add a bit of tension to it, but it's kind of a little bit more middle grade. I think temperature was just useless here. No, I don't think that there was anything they really did to deal with that.
I don't disagree with that. I think the temperature one's kind of irrelevant. It doesn't really come up that much. So, not that fussed about that. Here's a little thing that did occur to me, though, as I was watching this. Now, this is not to take away from it. I think it's really well done. I like seeing Claire kind of, spike the guy's drink outside at the staff room so that he gets sick and he has to run to the bathroom. And, like, all these other elements I quite enjoy, how it all clicks together. All very good. It's a really well done sequence. Like you say, it's a very heist movie-esque kind of scene. However, it did occur to me that wouldn't, like, you've got, the floor, which is pressurized, you've got sound detectors, all the rest of it. Surely someone using the computer when no one's meant to be in there would be the other thing that should set off an alarm?
Look. You're absolutely right. But, like, it's weird how the movie deals with it, because, yes, what should happen here, if everything else is only armed whenever this room has a person inside, is that the moment that door closes without someone inside, the computer should shut down.
Yes.
And not be able to be booted back up. Like, there is no reason to still have it accessible. But if we run with that, it's doubly weird because when they do finally end the sequence and the guy re-enters the room, he turns on the computer and is immediately greeted by an alert that says, here's the key log for everything that just happened while you were out. So they were always going to be found out regardless.
I mean, I don't think that's a problem from, because like they're gone. They've done it. It's just about being caught in the moment.
Yeah.
I don't think that matters, but the fact that pops up immediately is kind of weird, though. It's like you feel like
right.
I mean, to be fair, I think the idea is he at least presses something to make it come up, because obviously the scene ends with like the knife coming down. It's like right as they're getting out, the knife drops and lands on the table. So this guy comes in and just sees a knife in the desk next to the computer, and he's like, what the hell? And so he has reason to suspect that something is, something is afoul in the room. Something's went awry.
Yeah. Also, I guess for me personally, I didn't like the fact that they set up the sound sensor as a thing. Not because it's not an interesting concept to have. It makes it so there's a lot more tension of like, the mouse coming after Jean Reno and having to fight off that. I get all that. What I don't like about it is towards the end, they are making a lot of noise and it doesn't really matter. They keep on saying like, oh, we're close to the barrier. But like, it seemed like they should have already been over that point. And if they weren't over that point, then there was no need to be as quiet as they were, because they were clearly allowed to make a lot of noise.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where they kind of set up in a way where the sound going off would just immediately like end it. Maybe what they could have done is have something where they do make an accidental noise at some point, but the consequences aren't like immediately dire. It's like, oh
yeah,
so. I
mean, easy solution here. Whatever's going on inside the room, I'm sure would be locked down to some extent, but they point out that you need 2 keys in order to enter the room. The one of the main guy and the one of the secretary at the desk. Have the alarm go off. Everything's going crazy. The secretary knows we need to get into the room right now to see who's in there, but the dude's still throwing up. So they got like T-minus 10 seconds until she can run over, get him into this office and get back into the room.
Yeah, it has to be very late in the scene though, because I think you do want it to be like the forced quiet for as long as possible.
Oh, yeah.
Like that moment where he almost hits the floor, that has to be quiet. That's part of what makes that moment so iconic, is him just quietly trying to like not hit the floor, and then like the sweat dripping down his glass, and like him trying to catch it so it doesn't hit the floor. So it's really well done movie making. That's the thing. There's some maybe logic holes you can maybe point at, but as far as like a movie sequence is shot and edited goes, like it's pretty immaculate, right?
Oh yeah.
Everything from them talking about like the plan beforehand, and then the entire execution of it. Like there's like a 25 minute period of the movie which is just really nicely done in setup, which is actually kind of illuminating for the rest of the movie though, because it makes me go, well, why isn't the whole movie as a whole set up as well as this sequence is? It's very on its own in a lot of ways, but
yeah. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I think that one of my issues, and I don't really have something I can point to, it was just kind of a vibe I was getting, was once we get to the point of him dangling on the ground, everything after that, I just felt like, okay, no tension. Like, it didn't feel like there was ever going to be an issue after that point, because all he needed to do was get pulled back up. Like, he had the disc, everything was fine. He just needed to come back up. And I think that's the point where I kind of felt like just wrap up the scene, but it still went on for a good 2.5 minutes. So that's my only little minor complaint, and it's really just based off of vibes.
Okay. Well, afterwards, there's a little bit where Jean Reno clearly is kind of villainous and wants the disc for himself, but Ethan Hunt tricks him into thinking the one that he got in his hand isn't actually the disc, because he's a bit of a magician and he's like doing little tricks where he's making his disc hide. But it turns out that Jean Reno did have the real disc, but he was just tricked into thinking it wasn't, so he threw it in the trash. So Ethan just pulls it out.
Play.
Yeah, that's an alright little scene.
I enjoy it, especially because from what I read, it isn't actually any CGI or anything. All these little David Blaine card tricks he's doing with the disc are actually him just doing sleight of hand. So kudos to Tom Cruise of being able to do that at least.
Yeah, I mean, we should mention, like, whenever he pulls off a face mask in this, there is kind of like a moment of CG just as he's about to pull it off, where they're clearly transitioning to like whatever he's wearing to pull them like the face off. Right. Which did stick out a little bit, but it's very quick, and it's because it's in this moment of like quick movement. It's not like super egregious, even though it's 1996 CG. So, I mean, credit where credit's due for that looking as good as it does.
I think the only thing that really dates this movie is the technology they're using. Everything in that's 96. But if you're talking about special effects and stuff like that, I think it's absolutely one of the top movies of this time. Like, it's not something... What was the one that we just did? It came out around the same time as Jurassic Park. It was the...
Virtuosity?
Oh, God. Yes, Virtuosity. We just did that. And, like, those visual effects felt pretty dated for the time. Like, it felt like they were a bit more back in that early 90s period. This one, for being mid-90s, I think they knew their limits and they played with them extremely well, mostly by doing a lot of practical stuff and then mixing in CGI where needed.
Yeah, Virtuosity was a review over in the Atomic Cinema Experiment, our sci-fi movie podcast that you can also go check out. I honestly, I was impressed with the effects in this still. All the stuff in the third act looks shockingly good, given what I thought it could have ended up looking like. So we'll get to that in a little second here. But this is the moment where Tom Cruise says to Ving Rhames, "Hey, when we do the handoff, your mission is to like make sure it doesn't actually leave the train and like it all stays with us, and no one in this list ever actually gets killed because of it." And Ving Rhames, as it turns out, is like, "Yeah, I'm kind of a good guy. I don't want to like get all these agents killed." So it also reveals here that Claire's the one that hired or found Jean Reno's character, which is also a further hint that, hey, she might be a bad guy because she hired the bad guy.
This is also where we get the pivot point where it seems like he figures it all out, but the audience is still left a little bit like confused, or at least I was. Maybe you got it.
I mean, I wasn't. I thought it was spelled out in a like really clunky way. So he does a whole thing here where after Jean Reno storms out, the Bible he was using to like get the passages from to speak in code to Max was on the floor. So he picks it up and it sort of landed with like just the front cover open, and there's a stamp, a library stamp from the hotel that Jon Voight said he was staying at in Chicago at the start of the movie. And they really spell it out to you because you hear a little audio clip of like as Tom Cruise is staring at the book, you hear like Jon Voight say it from earlier in the movie, a little flashback audio soundbite, and he's staring at it, and I'm like, oh, well, he's just figured it out then, so we're good. We know it's him.
Okay, but like, walk me through it because I still don't get it. Why is this book having Jon Voight stole a Bible from a hotel?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. The book is here in the safe house. Okay, fair enough. Why does that mean that he did it?
Because that's where the all the stuff that he was saying to Max apparently was stuff he was taking from the Bible.
That stuff is in every Bible. It wouldn't matter if he stole this book from a hotel. Like, if he just found a Bible anywhere, it would have still said the same stuff.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't necessarily prove that it's him, but the fact that there's a Bible inside the hideout that comes from where he was suggests it's him out of everyone who was there, right? So there'd been a Bible in the hideout. I mean, depending, it could have just already been there, depending on where it is they're hiding out. But I think it being the exact place, the exact hotel he said he was at the start of the movie suggests that it came with him, and therefore there's a reason why he would have traveled with a Bible, and therefore he's most likely behind. Now, admittedly, I agree, it doesn't necessarily prove 100%, but of course, I was already thinking, you're the villain, you're the villain, so I am taking this as confirmation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was either that or this scene is immediately followed up with Claire coming in and like being more of a temptress to him again. So there's kind of that inkling of, oh, maybe she's the one that's actually responsible.
Yeah, she touches him on the face and like kisses his cheek, and it's like either you want to have a relationship with Ethan, or you're sending some really weird mixed signals here. But Ethan goes to call Kittredge, right? He goes to a payphone, right? He goes down to the
Well, yeah, he sees on the news that his parents have been arrested for some drug bust.
They framed his parents, or it was like his mum and his uncle, for growing weird, like, hard narcotics. So he goes to the payphone to call Kittredge and says, this is a bunch of bullshit and yada yada, right? But he's actually kind of setting them up so that they know he's in London, because he wants them to come and, like, see who the real Job is and all the rest of it. So he's setting all that up. But I noticed during this scene that there was someone at the phone next to him with their back to the camera, and I went, that's Jon Voight. And it would be one thing if it were just a normal guy, but it's a dude in a trench coat and a fedora, and it's like, yeah, okay. But here's the thing, I was thinking, oh, they're going to do that thing they did earlier where Ethan later on goes, oh, I saw you earlier, and we cut back to the waiter at the gala that we're at for the mission. I thought they were going to do that and, like, sort of say, hey, Jon Voight was in this scene and you didn't notice. No, Jon Voight, like, turns around dramatically and is like, dun, 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 and they even play, like, a villain moment until they start pretending that, oh, no, everything's okay, and, like, oh, yeah, I crawled out the river, I came to find you, but you'd already left, and he spins the whole tale. They go to a diner or something and sit down and talk about how he's alive and how he's been following and trying to find him ever since. So, just for that villain moment, it does play like a villain moment, and looking back on it, it probably is. But I think what they were trying to go for is another one of those nightmare scenes where Ethan's unsure, like, is this really him? Is he actually here? But then once he, like, starts coughing and, like, collapsing a little bit, Ethan's like, oh man, he's actually here. This is real. Crazy. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. You're right. That's probably what they were trying to go for. But because I saw him before Ethan did, I didn't even consider. Yeah, it doesn't work. So he basically says, oh, I think it's Kittredge, and tries to talk about, okay, what happened that night when everyone died. But as he's describing all this and Ethan's talking about it like he's agreeing that it's Kittredge, what Ethan's actually thinking and seeing in his head is what actually happened, presumably, is how Jon Voight did all these things. So Jon Voight's, like, sort of shooting himself with his own gun. It's so weird looking too, because he's got, like, a glove on, and he has to bend his hand around like that in order to make it show up on the camera glasses. Yeah. And then, you know, the car, and he even thinks at one point, oh, Claire must have blew up the car. But, oh, no. Wait, no, he could have done that himself. He doesn't have an accomplice. He's trying to convince himself that Claire's not a baddie. Right? Yeah. So he goes through all this. So he's clearly thinking Jon Voight's behind all this the entire time, and Jon Voight's saying, hey, don't tell anyone I'm alive. One other thing is that the one who stabbed the guy with the floppy disk is the only person who would have been hired, and that's Jean Reno, which we already technically knew because the knife that stabbed that girl he was with and the guy with the floppy disk was the same knife that Jean Reno dropped into the room later, the same type of knife. Yep. So, okay. And I swear, like, if they set up more of what they were going to actually do in the train for the handoff, I missed it, because we cut to the train pretty quickly after this. Yeah, no, they do nothing. And I'm like, okay, it's time for the handoff. And I remember it ending on a train, so let's do our big train sequence. So anyway, they do. You knew it was coming, right? They set up this like, you know, realistic mask tech earlier on, where Tom Cruise is pretending to be an old man. So they do a whole thing here where after the handoff, which is all sort of done kind of like covertly by leaving it for Max to get on the train, she's like, hey, go and get your money. It's in the baggage car, and Job will be there. He'll show up and see you. And then Max betrays him and phones presumably Job and is like, hey, like, he's in the baggage car. Like, he's coming. So, well, there's a whole long thing here of Ving Rhames trying to run a blocking thing so that they can't upload the disc or make any calls. But then, it's fine. It just fails. Yeah, it's fine. It's whatever. But so she, Claire, right, goes to the baggage at this point and comes in, sees Jon Voight sitting there, and says, "Hey, Jim, do we really have to kill Ethan?" I don't think we have to. And basically just, like, admits a bunch of stuff. I'm just saying, maybe we could open our marriage up a little bit. You're Jon Voight after all. So, of course, after she's confessed to everything and it's clear whose side she's on, the mask comes off and it's Tom Cruise sitting there in the Jon Voight mask. But then Jon Voight was hiding, like, behind something anyway, and he's in, like, sort of like skydiving gear or something. He comes out. and he's holding the gun, and this is where I was just having a hard time like taking him seriously, because I was just like imagining him with the crossbow from the end of Megalopolis.
Yeah.
And like Claire hesitates for a second, basically, at one point when she's like saying, "Oh, we shouldn't kill him, or we shouldn't do this, or whatever," and John Voight, in a split second, just decides, "Yeah, I need to kill you now." It just like turns and shoots her, and I'm like, so
she says something about like I think she says the line like "Don't kill him" or like "Don't Jim" or something like that, and then that's because his character's name's Jim, and he just turns around and be like, "Yeah, don't Jim," and then shoots her, and I'm like, this feels like a leftover from the love triangle plot. This feels like something where this was all built up to where she was trying to go with Ethan, and John Boy just wasn't having it.
It's so weird because it doesn't. Do you know what's so weird about them supposedly being married? Is that if they didn't tell us they were married, you would never know they were supposed to be married, because there's like early on in the movie when they're at the meeting with all the characters, and there's the little joke about, "Oh, don't make fun of my wife's coffee," whatever. Like, there's never a moment where he puts his arm around her, or they kiss, or there's never like any affection of any kind. So it's actually really hard to believe here at the end. And I guess he doesn't really care about his wife that much, because he kills her in the blink of an eye just for like not picking him. But it just kind of feels like, wait, was she a pawn in your plan this whole time? It's so underdeveloped, and in hindsight makes her as a character feel so underdeveloped, because her connection to Ethan feels kind of weird and like undefined and just this vague flirtation, and her connection to her husband feels underdefined because there's very little affection, or like, do they actually care about each other? And then like when they're being bad guys together, like, was she on board? Did he have to talk her into it? Like just little things to kind of build up who they are as characters would have been interesting, maybe.
Again, if we kept this love triangle plot, I think that would have been the defining feature, like something that would have made sense as to, you know, oh, me and Ethan have this secret love, but we can't do it because I'm with John Voight. But honest to God, I think that in the cut that we got, the only reason that they kept in the fact that they were husband and wife is so that he could say the biblical line of "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife." I think that's the only reason they kept it.
Yeah, the fact that they're married really is not like the only thing I guess it kind of explains is why she's working with them, but that didn't need to be a marriage thing.
She could just be greedy. She could just have like, oh, we're gonna get $10 million for this, and I'll take home $5 million, and that's more than enough in 1996. Characters is poorly written. I mean, so is John Voight, to be honest. Like, none of the characters really came off that well written. But basically he's like gloating, saying, "Oh, I'm about to kill you, Ethan," and Ethan's like, "But I'm not the only person who knows you're alive," and pulls out the glasses, and behold, Google Glass. 20 years beforehand.
Yeah, and then the smartwatch that Kittredge is wearing, who's also on the train looking for everyone, for the record. He sees this footage on his watch, and I'm like, okay. And I guess they're supposed to have tech that's a little ahead of the time before the public has it, but this does feel really weirdly far-fetched that they had this in 1996.
Look, I can accept that they had some level of primitive video streaming and portable devices. I can accept that. But you're telling me this dude has an HD watch? No, thank you.
So the funny thing is, at the time when this came out, I'm sure that just felt like, oh, this is the futuristic stuff that this like crazy spy team have. That's kind of cool and exciting. It's actually worse now in hindsight, because like, oh, we have some of these things now, so it feels worse now because we know how long it took to get those things. Right. It actually makes it feel worse now. But who cares about any of this? John Voight is up at the roof of the train because Jean Reno is coming in with a helicopter to come and get him. So John Voight's got the suction cups and he's like crawling along the train, and Tom Cruise is like, nah, I do stunts. So he jumps up on top of the train and he starts like going down the train following him, and there's like, you know, and John Voight knows he's there because at one point Cruise's jacket comes off and like flies past him. And honestly, this stuff looks surprisingly pretty good.
Yeah, so that was the one thing that I wasn't sure of in this movie, because I knew that the big set piece for the later Mission Impossible movies is that the stunts are real. He actually climbs up on this building. He actually jumps this canyon. He actually does all this stuff.
Yeah.
So when this one started, and it very obviously had a lot of blue screen and green screen and compositing stuff going on, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. But as the scene continued, I think that they did a great job of keeping the geography of the scene understood. We always understood where the characters were in relation with each other. And also the wind effect, like the blowing back of these characters as if they were on a massively fast train, really does still work.
Yeah, no, it looks really good, and there's some fun bits here, and definitely gets over the top. Don't get me wrong. Like Tom Cruise at one point grabs the hook from the chopper, and like hooks it onto the train, so he's stuck tethered to it. So when the train goes into this big long tunnel, most people probably expect the helicopter's going to like crash and explode at that point. No, the helicopter just ducks down and is like inside the tunnel, flying down the tunnel, which also looks surprisingly good for the time as well.
Yeah.
So where it gets maybe a little bit on the silly side, like too much, is when Tom Cruise like puts the chewing gum explosive on the front of the chopper after he jumps onto it, and it's like, and that's when the Mission Impossible team kicks in, because it's like,
the big moment,
right? He puts this explosive chewing gum on the front of the chopper, and then the blast actually just propels him back to the train, so he lands on the train. And then the chopper like blade just sort of stops like right in front of his neck when the train slows down. So I like that final moment's definitely like, okay, we're into. I mean, it was all absurd technically, but that final moment's the only one where I'm like, okay, that was a bit too cartoony. Like, you give me a little bit of reason to think that he'd still be alive. I don't really quite buy him surviving that, but fine, whatever.
I mean, I'm okay with him surviving it. I guess my issue is the blade moment. I think that the blade coming like that close to his neck does just feel like one bridge too far. But everything else up until then, I was like, yeah, this seems reasonable enough. I'm okay with the understanding of he got blown back. Maybe he's not feeling great, but that blade around his neck just felt like, okay, no, this is some Final Destination shit going on now. This is death wants you. My one tiny little nitpick in this, and I think it's specifically done for the audience's sake, is they have another train passing by our train at one point, because Tom Cruise is dangling over the side, and so he has to pull himself up at the last second. The train is honking at him. Why would the train be... You're going like 300 miles per hour relative to each other there. And for some reason, he's honking at this dude who he wouldn't be able to see until like 50 feet ahead of time. And by then, it's just splat. So I think the honking sound effect was for the audience's sake, but it just seemed out of place to me.
That's fair. Yeah. It's a surprisingly fun action sequence, and it kind of brings the movie up a little bit at the end, where in a franchise that had become known for its big set pieces, and I do think they get better. This movie having such a good fun heist sort of set piece in the middle, it was nice that the convoluted and like the twisty double cross ending we could have fun with the action, because let's face it, I don't think most of us give much of a crap about Jon Voight turning out to be a villain, and I certainly didn't care about Claire dying, because it's not like I was super invested in her character either.
Oh yeah, Claire I could definitely pass on, but it was weird as I was watching it, because all I could think is Jon Voight is a character from the original series, and the way this finale treats him feels like it's just pissing all over the people who liked the original series.
It's almost like when they all refused to come back for that opening, they rewrote like who the villain was just out of spite, and be like, oh well, in that case, we're going to make one of the characters he's the monster. He's the monster of the whole thing.
He's the one who's killed all of his friends, everyone you ever loved. It's him. He's the one who did it.
Oh dear. Yeah, and there's a little epilogue scene of like Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames having a chat, and just sort of Ving Rhames has gone back to be an agent again, because he's like sort of like cleared his name by helping with all this. Ethan's parents have been exonerated from their fake crimes, and he's like, I don't know if I want to get back out of the spy game. I don't know why I'd be doing it. But the movie ends with him in a plane, and he's given the same code words by the flight attendant to get the message for a new mission, and he sort of looks shocked as he's realizing, oh no, I'm getting a mission. And then credits. So
yep,
there you go. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good action movie overall, but it's definitely not a great action movie. I think it's just the convoluted plot is just, it takes itself too seriously as well as being convoluted and just not actually making me care about the characters. So it's more of a hindrance to the good parts than it is a help to the good parts. But the good parts are pretty good. Like there's a reason why it was able to stick around and become a franchise. But it's kind of like I think a lot of people think 3 is where it really started to be what it is, and that might be true. Although I think for me it's really 4s where I'm like, okay, this is what this franchise actually is, and it's kind of what I want it to be. But you know, I think this does have some interesting beats to it. It's got some charm because it is genuinely of a different era to like most of the franchise. So it feels really weird to go back and see the first one from the 90s. And I'm sure 2 will feel pretty old school as well by comparison.
Oh, yeah.
But once you get to the third one, though, you're at 2007, and it's only a few years till the fourth one, and then it's only a few years, you know, like they're a bit closer at that point.
So by the time we get to the third one, it's still 18 years old, is what you're saying.
Look, yes, time has moved on considerably, but that also just points out how old Tom Cruise is now, because he's still in his 30s in this movie. You know, he's a relatively young man.
In 1 or 3?
In 1.
I would say late 20s. Let me check on when he was born. I don't think he would have been that old.
Well, he's in movies in the 80s, so I
that's right, he was. I always associate him with the early 90s, not 80s.
Yeah, he was playing teenagers in like the early 80s, so he must be in his 30s by this point.
You're right. By this, he was 34.
He's only 1 year younger than me in this movie.
Mm-hmm. And as we see, you are clearly in the exact same physical condition as he is.
Oh yeah, I'm in the same peak physical condition.
Yep.
I was a year ago, so yeah. I mean, obviously things have went awry in that last year. No, but it's kind of funny though. Like he's my age pretty much in this movie, and we have watched him age over the course of 8 movies to 2025. I'm like, this is like a window into my future almost.
Yeah.
But
I want people in the comments, please get on Pete for thinking that seeing Tom Cruise age is going to be exactly the same as how he ages.
Oh, no. Obviously, Tom Cruise looked shockingly not like he was getting old for a long time. I do think it shows now. I think the last 5 years it has been showing, but there was a long time where he was getting away with just playing any age roles in his 50s. But I think once he got close to 60, it was like, okay, the cracks are starting to actually form on his face. I can see it.
Yeah. The one that maybe people will hit or miss there. I never actually saw the movie, but from the trailers, the one that got me was Oblivion. I was like, you got something different to you now. I don't know what it is, but it's there.
Yeah. No, it's just kind of funny, though, to realize that he's more or less my age in this. And then most of my life has been from this, when he did this movie. It's just a weird sort of two sides of the same thing.
The wheel of time continues to turn.
I guess it's my way of saying he's almost twice my age, which I guess is technically true.
62.
Yeah.
He's exactly twice my age.
Oh, la. David super young over here.
I'm a little baby face.
Oh, aye. That's what people think when they look at you.
Honest to God, that's kind of why I grew out the facial hair, because shave this off, it ain't good. I do have some extent of a baby face.
Yeah, I don't like the way my face looks without the facial hair. It's just my facial hair gives it shape. It's too round without, so it gives it a nice bit of definition.
When I was going through editing old comics episodes, there was one point where you shaved it off, and I was like, that's not right. Let's not do that.
If that happened, it's because I messed up when I was trimming and I had to shave it off to make it even. Because that's the only reason why I would do it.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so yeah, Mission Impossible. It's all right. It's got some good things in it. The plot's a bit of a convoluted mess, or it's certainly an uninteresting mess at the very least. Yeah. You know.
Again, first half hour, I felt like there was so much potential. I felt like they could have done anything, but the moment they locked into that, I have to clear my name plot, it just immediately lost all interest to me.
Yeah, it felt more generic once they said that's what it was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, we'll get into our various ratings and feelings here. Scene of the movie.
I mean, it's got to be one of the action pieces. I think that's pretty clear. And it's honestly a toss-up for me between the floor dangling part and the train sequence at the end. Because while the floor dangling, I think, was a better sequence independently, I think that the train sequence is just kind of the better action set piece overall. I think it's got the other one's more tension, the other one's more thrills, whereas I think the last one's more spectacle. So it really comes down to which one do I think is my preference. I'm probably going to go with the vault break-in. I think I'm going to go with that sequence there. But again, like I said, the last 2 minutes of that I think could have been sped up a little bit. But the entire him lowering down into the room and having to do all that stuff really worked for me.
Yeah, that's my pick as well. It's also the most iconic scene from the movie. It's the bit that's, if you're going to like give a still to show Mission Impossible or parodied it, you're parodying that scene. So that's the bit you're doing. So yeah, and I think it is the most remembered section of the movie for a good reason. So, all right, MVP.
I'm trying to think if there's anybody who's even like getting close to Tom Cruise. And to be honest, Tom Cruise as a character, not a lot to him, honestly. But I think from a charisma standpoint, he's the only one who even stands a chance here. He is the leading man. He is the one the central focus is placed on. I think there are long swaths of this movie where I don't really give a crap about him, but he makes up for it in the action scenes. So no one else really puts up much of a fight. I think that the closest would probably be Ving Rhames, but he's just not given nearly enough time or character to make it worth it. So yeah, I got to say Tom Cruise.
I mean, Luther, Ving Rhames' character, is the only one who's ever, like, we ever get to find out, oh, he's actually, like, stands for something and cares about what they're doing. It's a very small thing, but him saying that he doesn't want to, like, let that list out is like, oh, you actually care about something going on here, and it's not just, I don't know, it was, like, the most character anyone but Ethan ever really got, to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
As little as it might be. But yeah, it has to be Cruise, really. I mean, it's a sort of thing where I almost want to be a dick and say Brian De Palma, but I like, having seen and loved a lot of his movies, this is definitely not up there with any of his best. And I think as good as the set piece scenes are and as well done as they are, I think it's still on him as a director how uninterested I am with a lot of the other stuff, even if it is a script level problem at its core. So I will say Tom Cruise as well, but it's kind of a lukewarm, like, by default pick rather than anything I'm feeling passionate about as of yet. All right, next up, what's your rating for visuals?
If we're counting special effects in this, which I think we should be, I think it's very solid. I think that there is a solid understanding of what their limitations were and working within those to make something that feels believable the whole way through. I don't think it's really doing a whole lot in terms of interesting cinematography or like setup of frames. It's not really got a intriguing color palette. It kind of feels just of the era. So it all kind of evens out a little bit. I think I'm still going to end up above the average point and say just kind of like a flat 6 for me.
Yeah, I only think he partially includes visual effects. To be honest, I think that's more of a production value thing.
Right.
The slight caveat I would say is that if, there's let's say the visual effects or like some of the world is visual effects, then maybe you'd say the design of that is part of the visuals because it's an aesthetic choice. It's, it's creative choices in that way.
Right.
I mean, I think it's fairly well shot. Like, I think it's a very confident, if a little over the top with the Dutch angles in a couple of key sequences. But I think the action sequences and the heist sequence are very well done. Like, that is all visuals and editing. That's what makes all that click. Right. So I think for that, I have to go a bit higher and say a 7. I think it is, and of course we're in the 90s here, so it's shot in film, so it looks better than a lot of modern movies just by default. Yeah. So that's also something worth mentioning. All right, sound.
I didn't really take note of a lot of sound stuff. The only thing is the Mission Impossible theme that they play whenever something cool goes on.
Notably, Danny Elfman scored this movie, but not the main theme. I mean, I'm sure he reorchestrated it in some ways, but like the main theme, of course, comes from the TV show, and it's the only memorable music in the whole thing. So, yeah.
I will say, trivia bit, Alan Silvestri was apparently originally tapped, and then he got outed, and the score that he was using got recycled into the Schwarzenegger movie Eraser, which I'm unfamiliar with.
Oh, I've seen. We'll be doing an Arnold season at some point, but I've seen that movie.
Fair enough. But yeah, for the sound, I mean, the Mission Impossible theme is iconic, and you know, you watch this movie, you're humming it for a little while afterwards. So it's not bad sound design, but it's also not this movie's creation. It's just something it got to adopt because it picked it up from the TV show. So I think once again, in that sort of vein, I gotta say this one's probably, I'll say 6.5, because at least it did do like a newer rendition of the sound, but ultimately it's not doing anything to bump it up to that actually good level.
Yeah, I was realizing there as you were talking that Eraser also has like a heist in the middle of it where they're breaking into maybe the FBI or something. I don't know. There's a place like maybe it's not a law enforcement place. Maybe it's just like a company. But there's a heist in the middle of the movie, which just is funny with that connection.
I mean, that's probably why he saved it for it. He was like, "Oh, look, I already made heist music. Here it is."
That's entirely possible. Yeah, sound. I think the sounds. I mean, I have a 5.1 system, and this is kind of in that earlier era of movies just naturally having 5.1 sound. And when I say natural, I don't mean it just happens. Like, there's mixers, there's people doing it. But what I mean is movies were originally released in theaters with 5.1 sound by the mid-90s, and this is kind of an early example of that. And the bass was rumbling, like, you know, when they were on that train at the end, like, you know, I was expecting neighbor complaints, if I'm honest.
All right. Cool.
So the sound mix was pretty active, at least during big sequences. There was definitely periods where it didn't feel as active. But, you know, it's definitely high quality in terms of its mixing, in terms of all that sort of stuff. I kind of agree, though, that outside of the main theme, there wasn't a lot of memorable music. So, but the action set pieces did sound really good, and I think that goes for a long way in a movie of this type. So I think I'm also going to hit that with a 7. I think the technical qualities of the visuals and the sound are both kind of reaching good territory for me. They're both very much in that solid camp.
Okay.
So, all right, acting.
Let's see, you give a 7 to this.
Spoiler, I'm not.
Nah, it's. I don't think there's any performance in this that really stands out. Even when you take the script into account, I don't think that, despite the fact that they're not given a lot of characterization, nobody's bringing that extra oomph to this role. So collectively, I think the question comes down to, do I think that Bland deserves to go under the 5? Do I think that something that is unimpressive, but not, you know, awful, deserves to go under the 5? And
to me, that sounds like a 5 to me.
Right.
What you're saying.
That's the thing, is like there's some categories where if you're bland, that's a negative, because that's something that you need to be like up on. Something like the writing and such, you need to be a bit higher to keep interest. But for acting, it is kind of that thing of, if you're just kind of delivering a serviceable performance, you deserve that middle of the road score. So yeah, I'll probably just stick with a 5 for that.
Yeah, I think 5 sounds about right for me here. Obviously, Tom Cruise does have some star power and charisma and whatnot, but for the most part, the performances don't.
It gets balanced out by Claire's performance. No offense to the actress, but it was just so dull.
I also think John Voight's not very good. Ving Rhames is likable enough. He's got a little charisma as well, I'd say. You know, he brings a little bit of charm. Jean Reno, I think, is fine. Like, I think he plays kind of the untrustworthy dude well enough. It's not that deep a character, but you know, it's fine. Yeah. He has a little intensity to him. So yeah,
I was a little bit confused as to whether or not they were going to try to make him the comic relief character, because he just kind of felt like he was bumbling at points, but then ultimately it seems like they're trying to go more with the menacing aspect.
Yeah, I'll agree with the 5 on that. All right, script.
Again, it's not exactly the high point of it here. It's left up to be a little clunky and confusing. The pacing's a bit weird at points as well. I think that this movie lives and dies by the, you know, 7 pages in the middle and at the end that say, and then the action scene goes here, and then does the very loose breakdown of it. Everything in between is just to get to those points. And as much as it is kind of, I like a movie that has a good double cross and a good twist to it of like, oh no, everything you thought was true is actually a lie. But this just wasn't quite on the level of competence to be able to handle that. So script overall is probably going to land at like, I'd say a 4 for me. I think it's under the half mark there just because it's not engaging.
Yeah. I started this off by saying that I think the story's a bit of a convoluted mess, and I think when I say something that strong, it probably should fall below the 5, because I do feel like the plot is actively boring me because of just how convoluted it is. Like, I'm not excited when they start throwing around too many details the way they do in this movie too quick. I just don't really care about it. It's only when they set a simple goal and then give me a fun sequence to achieve that simple goal that I really got invested. And it's why that middle section where they're doing the heist is the only part of the movie where I'm truly invested in what's really going on. So I think because of that, I think I have to be in a similar kind of wavelength. But I feel like going below 4 is also maybe suggesting it's, a complete train wreck, and it's not quite that either. So
no, it's a helicopter wreck.
Yeah, I'll agree with the 4. I'll be boring and just say the same number, but it's because I don't really feel passionate.
It comes down to that same bland level as like the acting sort of thing, but it's harsher when it's a script because that's just a lack of engagement throughout the whole movie.
I think it's beyond bland because I think it's almost aggressively trying to piss me off with the convo, like how poorly it's like making me care about what's actually going on.
Okay.
So yeah. All right. Production value.
I mean, it's got a lot of that. I'm not gonna downplay its production value here. It felt like they shot on location for a lot of this. You could feel that they were actually running through these cities. Even when they did the green screen, blue screen for the train sequence at the end, it felt like they put a lot of effort into it. Again, the wind tunnel aspect to it, where they were all their clothes, their face skin was like pushing back because of the speed of the wind. That's just not something you would see in a lot of other movies to put in that much effort for it. So I can definitely appreciate the production value put in behind it. Feels like they did have a lot of passion for this project, even if it didn't really kind of pan out in a lot of the normal senses. But I'm going to say production value deserves at least a 7. I'll stick with that, though. I don't think I'm quite going to go up to the 7.5.
Yeah, I am a little bit higher in production value because, like, it feels like a major budget movie of the era. It's got multiple cities, and it feels like for at least a couple of them, they shot some of it in location. Not all of it needed to be, but in Prague especially, there was a lot of running around in streets that would have been noticeable if they were extremely wrong. Now, I don't know Prague well enough to... It was definitely European streets. Like, there was no mistake in that. It was
Prague. They did go to actual Prague.
Right, and there's at least a few places in the London set stuff where they're definitely in London for that. Now, stuff like the train, like, I mean, they could have been anywhere for that. They're on a soundstage probably, but like, it felt like there was a lot of variety to the locations, and that brings production value. The effects were pretty good. It didn't feel like money was a problem when they were making this. So, I think production value, I have to go at least an 8 because it feels like it's. Like it felt like if nothing else they had money to throw, and I think you can see the money on the screen. It doesn't just feel like, oh, this was a fraud scheme where like the Electric State, where did that $320 million go? Oh, they're covering something up with that.
Yeah,
I can see every penny on the screen here, and it feels like an expensive movie. So yeah, I'll go with a solid 8 out of 10 on that. But
I mean, I'm kind of again, these newer categories, I'm still trying to feel my way through, and I don't want to go over the top, especially as we're going to see bigger and more expensive stunts later on in this series.
I mean, that's fair, but like, I do think you can't say a movie from the 90s has bad production value relative to a movie that cost twice as much from 25 years later.
That's true. Yeah, it is all relative.
It's relative to when it came out, so that's just something to keep in mind. All right, what is your final rating for Mission Impossible?
I'm really struggling here. I'm bouncing between a 6 and a 6.5.
Yeah, a lot of concentration on that face.
Yeah, I had a good time with aspects of this movie, but again, there's the problem of the acting and the plot, and those are that's like 2/3 of the movie minimum right there. Is how does the movie flow and what do the people actually do? Like I can't give it a 7 knowing that I have issues with those aspects of the plot. So I think I'm probably gonna come down at a 6, but that's mainly because I'm viewing this more from a technical standpoint. Again, if I'm talking about enjoyment, I think that this had very enjoyable moments to it that probably would get it that extra half point for me. But I'm going to stick with technicals here and say 6.
Yeah, that's fair. I think being more critical and thinking about it and thinking about what I like and dislike has probably nudged it down a little bit from where I've maybe put it in the past. I think in the past I'd have probably slapped a 7 on this. I think talking about it and realizing just how much I dislike the writing, I probably can't go. I mean, I probably won't go much lower. I probably will split that difference and go 6.5. But it's definitely a mixed bag, and there's definitely things in here that are actively not good.
Right.
But those standout moments that are good are really good, and it's kind of frustrating. But there's definitely other action movies that maybe don't excel in those 1 or 2 areas that this one does, but are better overall just because they make me care a bit more, they're more charming or whatever. Whereas, I wasn't really charmed by the characters in this or anything like that. It doesn't really have that going for it. So it's kind of in this weird no man's land for me. But it's one of these weird franchises where it kind of evolves into what it actually kind of is mostly known for now. So it'll be kind of curious doing this season and watching that transition happen, especially since I remember not liking the second one, but I couldn't tell you anything. I remember him climbing the side of a mountain. That is all I remember about Mission Impossible 2. I think he's on a motorbike at one point. That's it.
I saw there was Thandie Newton was in it as someone.
That's news to me. I don't remember that.
All right. Fair enough.
I don't remember that at all. I remember the Metallica music video. I remember that.
Okay, I'll assume I know what you're talking about once I watch the movie.
Which is funny because there was also a Limp Bizkit song for it, but Metallica had the main music video.
Oh, poor Limp Bizkit.
Well, the Limp Bizkit song is interesting because it actually incorporates the theme.
Does it?
You never heard this?
I might have. It sounds familiar now that you talk about it. I might need to look that up.
It's called Take a Look Around, I believe is the name of the song.
All right. I mean, I've never been a big Limp Bizkit fan, but then again, I'm most of society.
There's a few songs from that era that just were big at the time, so they're kind of nostalgia. But
it is a running joke in my household where we will like let out a groan in 2 pitches and then just go, "It's just one of those days," like all the time.
Very good. All right, so that's your extra homework, is to listen to the Limp Bizkit song for the next episode.
I might not complete that, but we'll see. We do still have to decide, does this make the cut? I feel pretty strongly where I'm at, but I want to know you first. Where are you feeling on this?
I'll think it can be higher than close.
That's where I'm at. Yeah, it's cutting it close. It's cutting it close. I think that from like a reputational standpoint, it would make sense to put it in makes the cut, but since we're doing the whole franchise, that would just be kind of a blanket to say like, oh, everything makes the cut.
Yeah, I feel like it's like the name's so famous that it feels weird to not like one be more praising of it and whatever, but it is flawed, and I don't think it is a surefire thing. Because I remember like when 3 was coming out, I remember just not really giving that much of a crap because my memories of 1 were like, yeah, there's some fun stuff in 1, but I didn't love it. And then I didn't like 2. And again, we'll see how much my opinion on that holds up because I've not seen it since the year 2000. Right. But I remember not being that excited or interested in the 3rd one. And I saw it eventually at some point and think, oh yeah, that wasn't bad. And then 4 kind of blew me away, and 4 was like, okay, 4 is kind of what I want this to be. So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
We'll get there. I would assume that we are going to have, if I had to predict right now, I think we're going to have at least half the franchise is making the cut or higher. If I had to guess.
Interesting. Now, it's worth mentioning that, I don't there's definitely ones after 4 that I think are a bit more mixed bag again, because they're not as good. But we'll see if I feel that. Because, I mean, let's be honest, everything after 4 I've only seen the once, because, I have no reason to rewatch them. So, hey. Anyway, obviously next week we'll be back with Mission Impossible 2, or MI2, if you will. In fact, at one point in this movie, when they realise he's in London, the CIA guy's like, hey, get me MI5. And I thought, oh, we're actually going to have a movie called MI5 in about 4 movies' time. So that's funny to me. I don't know.
No, you're right. Yeah, I'm trying to get in the habit of knowing which subtitle they are. Rogue Nation.
That's correct. That was the 5th one.
Okay. Cool.
Rogue Nation, then Fallout, then Dead Reckoning Part 1, and then the Final
Fallout's
Reckoning.
the one I have problem of. I can't even remember Fallout is a subtitle.
All right, everyone. That is that. I will tell you that you can get bonus shows over in Patreon. You can also check out our sci-fi podcast, which I told you about earlier, which has been doing a variety of things. In fact, it's funny you brought up Virtuosity, because it came out this same week as this episode, funnily enough.
It's almost like I intended that to happen.
No, you did not.
I could have. You don't know.
You did not. I know you did not. So you can check out that. You can also get bonus content over at Patreon. Me and David do 2 monthly Patreon shows as part of that. There's other bonus content too, but those are the 2 of the headliners, and maybe what you're most interested in. One of them is called the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. And then the other one is Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made, and there's some real trash in there. So look forward to that. And I want to say that we've got like a spy episode coming up. There's like a Patreon vote maybe soon for a spy episode.
Yes. That's going to be the end of this month. So actually it's
already happened. The vote's already happened. But what I'm saying is the episode won't be out though for another month.
Yeah, it's going to be at the end of May.
Yeah. For the second half of Mission Impossible season. So not that it'll be that related, but that's why it's spy movies, because we're doing Mission Impossible.
Obviously, we tied into the middle of Mission Impossible season with the ever so clear relation to Hulk Hogan.
Yes, we're doing Suburban Commando this month, so if that sounds like something you want to hear us talk about, then you can go do that on Patreon. But that is the show, everyone. Like, subscribe, ding the bell, all that usual stuff. Let us know in the comments what you think of Mission Impossible. I'm actually not really sure how passionate people are for this first one in particular. Like, are we have pissed people off with our more mixed thoughts? I'm not sure.
I can only hope so, because pissed off people leave more comments.
That is somewhat true, yes.
Let's do that.
That's somewhat true. But thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you didn't get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.